everyone, this is Ann from River City Soapworks. Thanks for joining me today while I make a 5-pound loaf. So goggles on, gloves on, let's get to soaping. Okay, I am ready to get soaping here. I've got my oils ready and I have my lye water ready as well. So I'm going to get my stick blender and begin pouring that in. And if you've seen my other videos, you know I don't like to stick blend too much at first because I like to keep my soap batter at a thin emulsion stage while I'm working with color and fragrance, and then I can thicken it up if I need to. So let's go ahead and get started. And that's all that I want to do for right now in terms of stick blending, because I want to keep things thin. So I'm going to pour off this into 3 separate batches. So I'm going to be making a layered soap with 3 layers. The bottom layer is going to be almost kind of like a light charcoal gray. The middle layer I want to have white with calendula petals mixed in, and then orange on top. So I'm going to pour this off. Into a couple other containers. So I've got about 3.5 cups or so in each container. I should have had more paper towels ready. That's something I go through, a lot of paper towels when I'm soaping, because I don't like soap batter being around where I can touch it. So I'm going to do 3 layers. The first is going to be gray, and what I'm going to be using for that is this black pearl mica that I just got in from Nurture Soap Supplies. I don't know if you can see that. My lighting is sometimes not so great. Change. It was like Christmas here today. I got a big supply of colorants in from Nurture Soap Supplies. And so that's always fun to open those. So I'm going to, another paper towel here, I'm going to put in, I don't want this to be black, I really just want it to be kind of a light charcoal gray. So I'm going to add, we'll start with maybe 1/4 of a teaspoon and see what that gives us. Speaking of color, I get a lot of questions about my color palette on the back here. Let me tilt the camera a little so you can see. It looks really grungy right now. What that is I have liquid colorants, mainly that I use for melt and pour, and I have taken them and made little samples of what they look like in either white melt and pour or clear melt and pour, so I can kind of see at a glance what that's going to look like. I made those a few years ago. They're getting a little icky looking just with things getting splattered on them, but it still helps me. So I want this to be really light. I'm not looking for a dark gray at all. So we're almost there just with that. I'm going to put a little bit more in just because when it saponifies I don't want too much of a color change. So if you can see, it's kind of just a dirty gray. I think that is going to do it right there. Let me stir that in. That's the color that I want. Now, for my middle layer, I'm going to bring back my bowl. I would like that to be white, and I'm going to put in some Calendula blossoms in this. So I have some titanium dioxide that I keep already mixed up in a little squirt bottle. I'm just going to give it a shake. Squirt bottle isn't always the best thing. Sometimes it leaks a little, but it lets me keep that pre-mixed and lets me shake it, so I kind of like it. These I picked up at Walmart. I think they were maybe 98 cents a piece. So I keep my most frequently used colorants that require pre-mixing in these. Also, if you've seen my other videos, you know using titanium dioxide makes me nervous because sometimes I get those glycerin rivers when I use too much of it. So I try not to. And that's about as white as we need that to be. I'm actually going to set this aside and bring out my third soap. And for this, I am going to use, again, the Nurture Soap Supplies. This is the Orange Vibrance Mica. Oh, I'm sorry. I take that back. I'm mixing a little bit of the Orange Vibrance with Brambleberry's Fizzy Lemonade that I've already pre-mixed. I'm going to give my Fizzy Lemonade just a little zap with my frother to make sure it's mixed all the way. I'm going to make sure we have all the lumps out. So I'm going to pour some of this in there. And again, I don't really want this, I'm not looking for a super bright orange. I'm just looking for orangish. If that's a color, if that's not a color, it should be. So I've used the Orange Vibrance alone before, and it kind of made, it almost made like an American cheese color, and I didn't like it. So I'm doing Fizzy Lemonade, and I'm accenting it with that Orange Vibrance because I want it to be a little bit more orange than yellow. I'm back, and I wanted to show you, I was able to dig out a soap. This is a soap I made almost a year ago, maybe 8 months ago, and I used Orange Vibrance Mica on this side, and I don't know if the camera shows it, but to me I was a little disappointed with, I didn't find it vibrant. I found it kind of muted, and it really, the color to me looks like a slice of American cheese. So I really felt like my soap kind of looked like a piece of cheese. Didn't like it. Maybe I didn't use enough, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't get that again. So I'm using the Fizzy Lemonade from Brambleberry, and I'm just going to add a little bit of the Orange Vibrance Mica to try to bring a little bit of an orange tint to it. So I'm going to get my mica and just put a little bit in there, and we'll see how that does. Yeah, and I really think that's all that we need. It just kind of made it not quite so vibrantly bright, added a little bit of gold to it. And that's the color I was hoping for. And what I'm trying to do is trying to get a color that kind of accents these calendula blossoms, which is what we're going to put in the white portion of the soap. So now that I have my three colors, my gray, my white, and my orange, I'm going to add the fragrance and then possibly thicken them up a little bit. And I typically use about 1 ounce per pound of oil. So these are 3 evenly split batches, so I'm going to go ahead and pour about a third. I'm just going to eyeball about a third of this in. And you can see that the fragrance has a little bit of yellow, so I'm waiting to see if it does any discoloration. In the past, I haven't had much of a problem with it accelerating, so hopefully that'll be the way again. Okay, and it looks good to me. It doesn't look like it discolored my batter. I'm going to go ahead and thicken it up a little bit and get it in my mold. The reason I want to thicken it up a little bit is I am going to try to have a little bit of a peaked layering between my 3 layers. So I need it to be a little thicker for that. Videos, I'm using the 5-pound loaf mold from Nurture Soap Supplies. It has the removable sides, which are really nice, and then the silicone liner. So let's go ahead and add this gray to the mold. I could have used activated charcoal to achieve this color also. It's just a matter of preference. Some folks have a little bit of a trouble with the activated charcoal staining a washcloth. I haven't really had that, but I suppose if you put too much of it, you could. We didn't add very much because we weren't going for a dark black, so I think you would be okay with activated charcoal for this also. So I've got it in my mold, and I am just going to take a spoon and just add a little texture to it. And it's not really that thick, so I might need to let it even thicken up a little bit. It's not really holding much of a texture. So sometimes you just, if you let it sit for maybe 10 minutes or so, it'll thicken up a little bit more, so you can add a little bit more texture if that's what you're going for. So we're going to give it just a minute. Okay, I'm back. It's only been about 5 minutes, and that gave me enough time for my batter to thicken up just a little bit, and then I just took a spoon and just added a little bit of texture because I don't want a clean straight line between my layers. I want a little bit of texture between my layers. So I'm going to set my mold over here out of my way, and now I'm going to bring out my white batter. So this will be our next layer, and for this layer we're adding the calendula petals to it. Okay, I'm going to add some of my fragrance. So what I might do is just add a tad more of that titanium dioxide just to offset the little bit of discoloration we might have gotten. Now I'm going to add my calendula petals, and you want to be careful, don't overdo it with these. You want enough that you add some visual difference, and sometimes you'll find, I tried to go through it ahead of time, that there are little kind of dark petals, and I try to pull those out when I see them just because I think they're ugly. I'm not going to do too much. What I am going to do though is hit this real quick with my stick blender, and that's going to help break up those calendula petals a little bit, make them a little bit smaller. So I'm going to burp my stick blender. Okay. Trying to get off as much batter off my stick blender as I can, and then what you can't see is I have a little cup, a little dish of hot water that I rinse off my stick blender with between colors. So now we're going to add this to the mold. So I take a spatula and I use that spatula to help break the impact of my second layer when I'm layering soaps, so that it doesn't break through your first layer. I always have trouble getting this side. I used to not stick blend once I put the calendula petals in, but I really think it looks nicer and is more appealing to the user of the soap when you've done that. It just kind of, it doesn't pulverize them, but it just makes them a little bit smaller, and I think more attractive in your soap. They look like little orangish yellow pieces. I'm going to try to get all of my batter out. Set that aside. So just like we had with the gray layer, this layer is, in fact, I'm going to tamp it down first. That's just to make sure we have the air bubbles out. This layer is a little bit thin for texturizing, so we might just have to give it a few minutes to thicken up a little bit. So I will do that and be right back. Okay, it's only been maybe 5 minutes again, and my batter's thickened up enough to give me the ability to just add a little bit of texture to it, because again, I didn't want a defined line between my three layers. So let me finish adding my texture. This. Set this aside. And now I'm going to bring out my top. So this is my mixture of mostly fizzy lemonade with just a pinch of orange Vibrance Mica. I'm going to add my fragrance to it, and just by virtue of its sat this time, it is thicker than my other batters. So I finish off my fragrance, stir that in good. I'm going to stir this also with the stick blender. Mix it up to thicken it. This is my cup of hot water that I use to clean off my stick blender between colors. So I just have it in there, give it a whirl, and you have a clean stick blender. So now don't forget to burp this. Be careful. I try to go in when my batter's a little thicker here. I try to go in slowly. Tap it down. There we go. And that's about the thickness I want it to be, I think. So I'll bring my mold back. I'm going to get my spatula again as I pour this between the layers. Boy, just a little bit it has that cheese color look to me. Maybe I just am not a fan of orange soap. Maybe that's my problem. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how it's cut. So this is a 5-pound mold, but I usually make 6-pound recipes, and I do that to allow for extra soap for making a texturized top. So I've got a little bit of soap left in my cup, but I'm going to tamp this down. So right here, my soap is to the top of the silicone mold, but I'm going to add the rest of my batter. I usually just try to pour that down the middle. It's thick enough that it's not overflowing. You couldn't do that if this batter was very runny, because obviously it would just be overflowing your mold. Okay. And now we take our spoon and texturize the top. Now I'm going to spritz it with alcohol. I have the worst. I need a new alcohol thing because it leaks. So I can't get it too close, otherwise it pours alcohol on top of my soap loaf. And now I'm going to take some, I think, calendula blossoms, not a lot, and just add them, sprinkle them just a little bit for effect. You don't want to get a big clump. So you just want to have a little bit. Here too, I've had to tell myself, oh, there's one of those nasty leaves. I've had to tell myself that less is more. Okay, I think that's good. With the calendula, I sometimes worry that it's not going to stick. So sometimes you can just take a little tool, and I really don't know how the lighting is here. I hope you guys can see this. But sometimes I just take a tool and kind of touch the calendula down. You can do it with your finger, but then you run the risk of kind of, if you have swirls in there that you like, sometimes you mess those up a little bit. I'm just really lightly, just making sure that it kind of sticks to the soap. One of the things I like about the Nurture Soap Supplies mold is this plexiglass cover that you can just slide right over, and it lets you peek at your soap without messing it up, and it keeps it warm in there if you're gelling, which I do. With this mold, I used to have to cover with a towel my molds, but with this particular mold, I do not have to cover it with a towel. I just set it like this and leave it be, and it gels just fine. So thanks so much for watching. I will come back in a couple days and upload a cutting video, and we'll see how this turned out, and hopefully it doesn't look like a piece of cheese on top. So thanks so much for watching, and subscribe to my channel for updates, and happy soaping.